Welcome to episode number 5 of Working with Robert's Rules. In this episode, we focus on what is really one of the foundations of running an efficient meeting, and that is the agenda. It requires a lot more attention than most people give to it. So let's get to it. So really what this is all about is a meeting is a better meeting when you prepare for it. And there's a process that we go through whenever we're organizing meetings. First, we need to know working knowledge of the bylaws, and contained within those bylaws are rules about when notices are sent out for meetings. We should understand those rules and follow them. Invariably, you need to give a couple weeks notice in a written format, whether it's by Canada Post or by email, depends on what your bylaws say. Now, when you send out a notice, an extremely important parliamentary principle is involved. And that principle is that the agenda for the meeting should be attached to the notice, because people will make decisions, members of your organization, as to whether or not they will be attending the meeting based on what's on the agenda. Really important principle. So when we go about preparing an agenda, there's many things we're thinking about. We're thinking about how we're going to start the meeting. Having an intention getter planned will capture the imagination of the group that's having the meeting. What is the purpose of the meeting? How does the group feel at the beginning of the start of the meeting? Is there a warm welcome? And do you need to set the stage for the discussions that are going to be transpiring in this meeting? And we need to put everyone on notice what the ground rules are. Are we using Robert's rules to administer this meeting? Now, the notice for meeting is actually, for corporations, for example, a legal document. So they must be sent out in the manner that is set out in the bylaws. Best practice calls for only those agenda items that are contained in the notice to be handled at the meeting. Some people use this old business, new business concept, which is fine. And there's nothing to stop discussion about a new issue. But really, those issues, if they're going to be dealt with by the organization, should be dealt with in the form of a notice of motion, which means they're going to be put on the agenda for the next meeting. They can be talked about at this meeting, but we're not going to transact any business about it at this meeting, as we're doing this to protect the rights of the members who aren't present, who made a decision not to come because of what was contained within the notice. Pouncing new items on them during the meeting, well, that really just is not fair. It's not equitable. And it doesn't call for a good outcome. The whole concept is that we all are informed at each stage as to what's going to happen. So building the meeting agenda, really you start off with a list of topics. You avoid putting administrative items on the agenda, ordering coffee, all that nonsense gets taken off of it. You want to do a preliminary pre-approval circulated to get consensus that everything that needs to be on the agenda is there. Wherever possible, when there's a need to give information to members, what we want to do is to do that in the format of reports that are circulated with the notice. This saves a lot of time and allows people to come to the meeting informed and ready to debate the issues and make decisions. When we formulate the agenda, we want to designate times, and we'll talk about that a little bit more, how important this is to keep the meeting on track. We want to formally present the agenda at the beginning of the meeting to the group, and we want their acceptance of it at the beginning of the meeting, and that's a very strategic decision to make. And we want to avoid adding on to the agenda issues or actions that we just aren't ready to make for whatever reason, maybe lack of information. One way to control the length of debate is to set time slots for each item on the agenda. Meeting planners should know that the actual start time is assigned right beside each item on the agenda. The agenda should provide an estimate of how much time is going to be assigned to each item. And we want to make sure that the agenda is structured in such way is that the most important items, the high interest items, are listed in priority, in that they're dealt with first, with the less important issues being dealt with later as we progress through the agenda. Remember that when agendas are timed, they can be subject to motions of orders of the day, which compel the presiding officer to go to that point in the agenda which is set out in terms of time limits. So we need to carefully consider each and every item that we're putting onto the agenda. Consider what supporting data is available, have there been committee findings, what alternatives are available, what are recommendations that have been brought forward to the group, what has been past practices by the organization. We want to see if there's been recent internal discussions for the item. And if appropriate, we want to include the proposed wording of the motion if it's well advanced as an issue. For dispensing information, nothing is better than written reports issued ahead of time. It's always very useful if you have committees that are issuing these written reports is to have the committee chair come up and do a brief 5-minute summary oral report of the contents of the written material, which has been circulated ahead of time and everyone has seen it, read it, and understood it and is informed about it. We want to include these reports in the mailing with the notice of the meeting. Very efficient way to handle things for the meeting. And this is just an efficient way to distribute information, making efficient use of everyone's time and making sure everyone's ready to debate and to make a decision on the issue. So here is a format I'm suggesting for everyone's consideration that is adopted for your organization. So basically, the structure works this way. We call the meeting to order, and then the chair, the presiding officer, makes a series of appointments: the recording secretary, the scrutineers, the parliamentarian, and the sergeant at arms. We then go to the credential desk to establish if we have quorum. We then ask the group to adopt the agenda as sent out with the notice. The agenda at this stage cannot be amended, but it can be reordered in terms of priorities of items. Maybe someone wants to discuss item 4 right away, not wait for us to work through 1, 2, and 3. Fair enough. Then we can have the oral reports after we've approved the minutes for the previous meeting. Again, I like to circulate these minutes with the notice in advance. And really the motion that we're calling for is a motion to adopt the minutes as circulated. Maybe there's some changes that need to be made, fair enough. Then we're ready for items brought forward from the prior meeting, issue 1, issue 2, and then we accept notices of motion for new business items. We can talk about new business items, but we certainly cannot pass them today because they weren't in the notice of the meeting. But they will be guaranteed to be put onto the agenda for the next meeting and will be in the next notice, guaranteed. And then finally, we can accept a motion to adjourn to conclude the meeting. So this is a structure and format that I think is a best practice when we're looking at organizing, preparing to run a meeting. Now, considerations for the agenda. It never hurts to put the mission statement of the organization at the top. We want to assign persons to have, they're ready to speak to an agenda item. If there's action required, we clearly spell out, what needs to be done. What I also recommend is adding below each item a subscript, which is clearly visible to everyone to see of how this matter will be dealt with. Like a motion to pass a budget, this will be approved by a motion, requires a seconder, it's amendable, it's debatable, and requires 51% vote approval. Doing this really helps the group, the members of the group, to have a shared experience with the presiding officer. And at the end of the meeting, it's really good when there's action items that are established. Maybe we need to have a report come back about our status of our financial statement. It's good to assign a person to each action item which has been established for the meeting, and as well as setting the date, time, and place of the next meeting. That becomes part of the minutes of the meeting and helps when we send out the next notice. So there we are, how we can make our meetings a little more efficient by really focusing on the structure, content, and the handling of the agenda. If you found this session useful, please really indicate that by clicking the like button. If you want to see more, and there's many more that these types of seminars that's going to be done in the future. So if you would like to see the ones that follow, lots of material in parliamentary process, please hit the subscribe button. And there's also a notification symbol that you can hit to know that every time I add a new element to this series. If you have any questions that you would like to have answered in future sessions, please feel free to make comments in the comments section, or how you found this video. I look forward to seeing all those. So thank you, and on to our next session shortly. We're all about making meetings run faster and more efficiently. Talk to you soon.